The evening began quietly, almost too quietly, the kind of calm that feels ordinary until later you realize it was the last peaceful moment before something shifts, and Michael did not know that yet as he sat on the worn gray couch beside his mother Evelyn, the television glowing softly in the dim living room of their Vermont home while rain tapped steadily against the windows. A slow rhythm that matched the steady pace of an old romantic movie playing on the screen, one of those films where the music feels heavier than the dialogue and the characters look like they are carrying whole lifetimes behind their eyes, and Michael had agreed to the movie night without thinking much of it because this was what they did now. Ever since his father passed away 3 years earlier, ever since the house became quieter and evenings felt longer, and he had moved back temporarily after his own life had cracked in places he did not know how to fix, a breakup that left him tired rather than angry, sad rather than bitter. And tonight he wore that sadness like a coat he could not take off, even as he tried to focus on the movie, even as Evelyn sat beside him with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture calm, her face relaxed but distant, like she was watching something far beyond the screen, and the room smelled faintly of tea and clean laundry. The small familiar details of home that usually made Michael feel safe but tonight only made him feel exposed, because the movie story of late love and missed chances was moving too close to his own thoughts, and he shifted slightly, uncomfortable with how strongly it pulled at him, wondering why this simple night felt heavier than it should, why his chest felt tight even though nothing was wrong. And as the movie reached a quiet moment where the characters sat in silence, Evelyn leaned just a little closer to him, close enough that he noticed, close enough that the warmth of her presence became suddenly clear, and she took a slow breath that sounded careful, measured, like she had practiced it many times in her mind, and then she whispered his name, not sharply, not urgently, but softly, with a weight that made him turn his head toward her at once, surprised by the sound of it, by the tone, because his mother did not usually whisper secrets. She spoke plainly, lived plainly, and kept the past neatly folded away, and when he looked at her, he saw something unfamiliar in her eyes, not fear, not sadness exactly, but resolve mixed with vulnerability, and before he could ask what was wrong, before he could make a joke to lighten the mood, she spoke again, her voice low so the words felt like they belonged only to them, saying there was something she had never told him, something she had carried quietly for many years, and the simple sentence landed harder than any dramatic speech could have, because it broke the invisible rule of their relationship, the rule that said the past stayed buried and the present stayed calm, and Michael felt a sudden awareness settle over him, the sense that the evening had just crossed an invisible line, that whatever came next would not be undone, and he nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue even as his mind raced with questions he did not voice, and the movie continued playing in the background, the music rising gently, unaware that it had become nothing more than noise, and Evelyn stared at the screen as if drawing strength from it, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the blanket, and she began to speak about a time before his father, before responsibility and routine, a time when she was younger and choices felt larger, and Michael listened, fully present now, the weight of her words pulling him forward, his own worries fading as he realized this was not just a story but a door opening, and the rain outside seemed to grow louder, the house holding its breath with him, and as she spoke, he felt something inside him shift, not yet understanding what it meant, only knowing that this quiet Sunday night, this simple movie, this soft whisper, was the beginning of something that would change the way he saw his mother, his past, and the choices waiting in front of him. Evelyn's voice was soft but steady as she began to reveal a part of her life Michael had never known, a chapter carefully hidden behind years of smiles and quiet routines, and as she spoke, he felt the room shrink around them, the glow of the television fading into the background while her words became the only thing that mattered. Before I married your father, she whispered, and Michael's heart skipped, curiosity and surprise mingling as he leaned in, sensing that what she was about to say could change the way he understood not just her, but the life they had shared together. There was someone else, she continued, and he blinked, caught between disbelief and fascination, because he had never imagined that his mother, always so composed, had once loved deeply, passionately, in a way she had never spoken about. And Evelyn's eyes softened, distant yet alive with memory, as she described a man from her youth, someone she had loved with all the intensity of first love, someone who had been a dreamer like herself, full of ambitions, restless energy, and visions of a life far beyond the small town she had grown up in, and Michael listened, unable to interrupt, feeling a strange mix of awe and confusion, realizing that his mother had been a person with her own desires, struggles, and heartbreaks long before she became his mother, long before she married the man who raised him, and she admitted, quietly but with a hint of lingering regret, that she had been faced with a choice that seemed impossible at the time, to follow her heart or to choose safety, security, a life that promised stability, and she had chosen the latter, marrying his father, loving him in her own quiet way, building a family and a home, yet never fully erasing the memory of the other life she had let slip through her fingers, and as she spoke, Michael realized that her confession was not about guilt or shame, but about understanding and sharing, a way of letting him see that life often demanded choices that left behind shadows of what might have been, and she described the man she had loved, the moments they had shared, the laughter, the late-night talks, the promises made in youthful certainty that the world would always be kind to those who loved boldly, yet the world had other plans, and he had wanted to leave, to explore, to start over somewhere new. And she had been afraid of losing herself, afraid of risk, afraid of stepping into the unknown, and that fear had led her down a different path, a life of love that was safe, dependable, predictable, but not the one her heart had first chosen, and Michael felt a pang of empathy, understanding perhaps for the first time how complicated the heart could be, how even the most ordinary people carried extraordinary stories beneath the surface, and Evelyn's voice wavered slightly as she admitted that though her life had been good, though her husband had been loving and steadfast, there were moments, small and fleeting, when she wondered about the life she might have had, about the happiness that could have been, and Michael felt a strange closeness, a new dimension of connection to his mother, realizing that she was not just the person who raised him, but a human being who had loved, risked, and lost, just like anyone else, and she looked at him then, fully meeting his eyes, her own shining with the honesty of her confession, and said, "I'm telling you this because I see you now, standing at a crossroads like I once did, afraid to choose, afraid to risk, and I don't want you to mistake comfort for happiness, Michael," and those words struck him hard, echoing in his chest, because he knew they were true, because he had been settling in his own life, afraid of being hurt, afraid of failing, and hearing his mother speak so openly, so courageously, made him reconsider everything he had taken for granted, from his past choices to the way he approached love and life, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of clarity, a sense that perhaps mistakes could be corrected, that life could be embraced fully, if only one had the courage to face it honestly, and as the rain continued to fall outside, tapping against the windows like a soft drumbeat of inevitability, Michael stayed silent, absorbing every word, every nuance, every pause and tremor in her voice, realizing that this was a turning point, not just in understanding his mother, but in understanding himself, in seeing that love and regret, longing and courage, were all intertwined, and that by acknowledging them, by speaking the truth, one could finally move forward, and Evelyn, sensing the weight of her confession, let the silence stretch between them, a quiet bridge of trust and revelation, and Michael, feeling the emotions swell inside him, knew that life could never be quite the same again, that he had been given a glimpse of a deeper truth, and that it was now his choice to heed it, to embrace it, to let it guide him toward the courage he had been avoiding, toward the love he had been too careful to pursue, and as the screen flickered with the romantic story of people finding each other late in life, Michael realized that the story they had just shared in that quiet living room was far more real, far more poignant, and far more powerful than any film, because it was alive, raw, and human, and it had changed the way he would see not only his mother, but the world and himself, forever. The days after Evelyn's confession were restless for Michael, as if her words had unlocked something inside him that he could no longer ignore, and each morning he woke with a quiet urgency, replaying her story over and over in his mind, thinking about choices, love, courage, and the way fear often stood between what we want and what we truly need, and it was during one of these restless mornings that his phone buzzed, and when he saw the message from Claire, his heart skipped a beat, the familiar name bringing a rush of memories he had tried to lock away, of laughter, shared secrets, and moments that felt too small at the time to notice their significance, and yet now, standing at this point in his life, they felt enormous, pressing on his chest with a weight of longing and possibility, and the message itself was simple, friendly, careful. "Hey Michael. I know this is random, but I heard you're back in town. Would you like to talk?" and he stared at it, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure whether to respond, wondering if reconnecting would be foolish or necessary, until Evelyn's words echoed in his mind, "Don't confuse comfort with happiness," and with a sudden clarity, he realized that he had been hiding from his own heart, afraid to risk, afraid to feel too deeply, afraid to let anyone see the pieces of himself that were tender, and he typed a quick reply, agreeing to meet, and within hours he found himself at a small cafe downtown, the kind with warm lights and soft music, where Claire was already waiting, looking as graceful and composed as he remembered, and when she saw him, her face softened, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, and for a moment, the noise of the cafe, the chatter, the clinking of cups, faded into nothing, leaving only the two of them and the weight of everything unsaid. And Michael's first words were simple, hesitant, "I was scared. Not of you. Of myself. Of choosing wrong," and Claire listened without judgment, nodding slowly, her eyes gentle, and when she spoke, it was like a balm to his worried mind, "I didn't need perfection. I just needed honesty," and those words struck him, hitting a truth he had avoided facing, that fear had been holding him back far more than any external circumstances, and as they talked, laughter and quiet moments of connection threading between them, Michael felt something he had not felt in months, a sense of hope, a fragile yet persistent spark that maybe things could be different, maybe love could be reclaimed if only one dared to try. And that night, when he returned home, Evelyn was sitting in the living room, the same calm presence, and she noticed immediately the subtle change in him, the way his shoulders seemed lighter, the way his eyes held a new brightness, and she said quietly, "You talked to her?" And Michael nodded, a small smile forming on his lips, "Yes. And I want to try again," and Evelyn's expression softened, relief and pride mingling in her gaze as she reached for his hand, her voice tender, "Then whatever happens, you'll know you were brave," and Michael realized she was right, that courage was not the absence of fear but the willingness to step forward despite it, and he thought about his past choices, about the times he had held back, and for the first time, he felt ready to embrace the uncertainty of love, to pursue it fully, to risk heartbreak because that was the only way to discover joy, and he knew that reconnecting with Claire was more than just rekindling a romance, it was reclaiming a part of himself he had almost lost, a part that longed for connection, for truth, for the deep, honest bonds that make life meaningful. And as the rain fell outside once more, heavier now, tapping against the windows like a reminder that life moves on whether we are ready or not, Michael sat with Evelyn on the couch, the familiar comfort of her presence grounding him even as his mind raced with possibilities, and he realized that what had begun as an ordinary movie night, a quiet Sunday, had set in motion a chain of events that would transform his life, that courage and honesty, whispered gently in a living room, could ripple outward to change everything. And as he thought of Claire waiting for him, smiling, waiting for the chance to rediscover what they had shared, he felt a swell of gratitude for his mother's courage to speak her truth, for the clarity it gave him, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine a future that was bright, uncertain, and beautiful, a future shaped by choice, by love, and by the willingness to finally step into the life he had been too afraid to live before. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar, with Michael and Claire cautiously exploring the fragile territory of their renewed connection, taking long walks through the quiet streets of their town, sitting in cafes where sunlight spilled across wooden tables, and sharing conversations that had once felt impossible, speaking honestly about fears, dreams, and mistakes without judgment, while Michael felt a growing sense of clarity and purpose that he had not experienced since before his heartbreak, a clarity that came from seeing his mother's courage mirrored in his own choices, from understanding that love required risk and that avoiding it only led to a life half-lived. And with each meeting, each gentle laugh, each shared silence with Claire, the past seemed to lose its hold, replaced by the possibility of a future built on honesty and openness, a future where he could embrace feelings he had once tried to bury, and yet it was not without hesitation. Doubts lingered in quiet moments, small questions that whispered fear of failure or rejection, but Michael found he no longer avoided them, he faced them, remembering Evelyn's words about comfort versus happiness, letting them guide him toward action rather than retreat. And one evening, after a particularly long day of talking and walking, he returned home to find Evelyn sitting on the familiar couch, the same soft blanket draped over her lap, the glow of the lamp casting warm shadows across her face, and she looked at him with an understanding that needed no words, a silent acknowledgement of the growth she had witnessed. And as he sank into the couch beside her, exhausted but exhilarated by the choices he was finally making, she reached for his hand, her fingers warm and reassuring, and whispered, "I'm proud of you," and Michael, feeling the weight of that simple sentence, smiled, asking softly, "For what?" And she answered without hesitation, "For choosing love even when it scared you," and those words resonated deeply, reminding him that courage was not about perfection or certainty, but about stepping forward with an open heart. And in that moment, sitting in the quiet glow of the living room with the rain soft outside, he realized that what had changed everything was not just his relationship with Claire, but the understanding that life's most profound transformations often came from honesty and emotional courage, from the willingness to risk disappointment for the chance of something real. And as the movie played softly on the screen, forgotten in their shared silence, Michael felt a gentle peace, the kind that comes after storms and restless nights, knowing that he was no longer running from love, that he had allowed himself to feel fully and sincerely, and that his mother's whispered truth had opened a door he could never have opened alone, a door leading to connection, hope, and the quiet joy of being seen and understood. And as the night deepened, he thought about the journey that had brought him here, the heartbreaks, the fears, the confessions, and the small courageous acts that built toward something greater, understanding finally that some whispers do not break lives, they save them, that some ordinary evenings hold extraordinary beginnings, and that the choice to embrace life, love, and vulnerability could quietly but irrevocably transform the heart. And Michael knew, with a certainty that felt both exhilarating and tender, that this was only the start of a life lived fully, honestly, and with love guiding every step forward.